The police cruiser rolled up before the moving truck even finished unloading. Blue lights flashing, neighbors peeking through blinds, and Karen, HOA president for 7 straight years, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed like she'd just saved the neighborhood from a criminal mastermind. The crime? I had filed paperwork to withdraw my property from the HOA, and she didn't like that. I'd lived in Brookstone Meadows for 8 years. Quiet subdivision, manicured lawns, endless rule book, no boats visible from street, trash cans invisible within 12 hours, approved paint colors only. I followed the rules until the rules started multiplying. New architectural compliance fees, guest parking permits, fines for grass height measured with a literal ruler, and the final straw, a $250 fine for unapproved driveway resurfacing. I used the same shade of concrete. Apparently, it was too modern. That's when I reviewed the governing documents myself, deeply, carefully, and I found something interesting. My property was part of a later development phase, Phase 3. And unlike Phases 1 and 2, our phase had a clause allowing withdrawal if 60% of Phase 3 homeowners consented. No shared structural amenities were affected. Proper county filing occurred. Nobody had ever used it, probably because nobody ever checked. But I did. I gathered signatures quietly. Neighbors were tired too. Within 2 months, I had 64%, more than enough. My attorney filed the withdrawal with the county recorder, legally clean, legally binding, and effective immediately. Karen showed up at my door the next morning. No greeting, no smile. "You cannot just remove yourself from the HOA." "I already did," I replied calmly. She laughed. That nervous, disbelieving laugh people use when reality doesn't match authority. "You signed when you bought the house." "I signed under Phase 3 covenants," I said, "which include a withdrawal clause." Her face tightened. That's when she said the words that triggered everything. "We'll handle this." Apparently, handle this meant calling the police. Karen reported, "A resident refusing lawful HOA authority and violating community rules." When the officers arrived, they were professional but confused. "Ma'am," one officer asked Karen, "is this a criminal issue?" "He's breaking HOA law," she insisted. "There is no such thing as HOA law. There are civil covenants. Big difference." I handed the officers a copy of the filed withdrawal, stamped, recorded. The younger officer skimmed it. "Sir, this appears to be a civil matter," Karen interrupted. "He can't just opt out. That affects property values." The older officer looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, we enforce criminal code, not neighborhood contracts." And just like that, the cruiser left. But Karen didn't. Within a week, I received 3 violation notices, a $500 fine for non-compliance, a letter threatening suspension of community privileges. Community privileges I no longer belonged to. They were acting as if nothing changed. So I responded formally. Certified letter, attached withdrawal filing, demanded immediate correction of HOA records. Instead of backing down, Karen doubled down. She circulated a neighborhood email. "Certain individuals are attempting to undermine the integrity of Brookstone Meadows." Translation: me. Some neighbors supported me quietly. Others worried I was destabilizing things. Karen's authority relied on fear of disruption. If one property could leave, what stopped others? 2 weeks later, an HOA compliance inspector stood on my driveway, clipboard in hand. I stepped outside. "You're trespassing," I said. "This property is still subject to review," he replied. "No, it's not." I pointed to the property boundary markers. Phase 3 properties withdrawn as of filing date. He left, but not before taking photos. My attorney sent a cease and desist letter. It outlined unauthorized enforcement attempts, potential harassment, risk of civil liability. Karen didn't expect legal pushback. She expected intimidation to work. While all this drama unfolded, I had been working quietly on something else, an investment opportunity. 4 homes on the adjacent block were for sale, same neighborhood, Phase 1 properties, fully bound to HOA, owners relocating quickly, below market value, Karen's block. See, I wasn't just frustrated, I was strategic. If she wanted to make my life difficult, I wanted leverage, and ownership creates leverage. Over the next 60 days, through an LLC, I purchased House 12, House 14, House 18, House 22, all on Karen's block. Rental potential strong, HOA dues current, fully compliant, legally mine. At the next HOA meeting, Karen addressed community stability. That's when I raised my hand. As owner of 4 Phase 1 properties, I began. The room went silent. Karen's expression changed. What? I'd like copies of the financials for my rental properties. Her color drained slightly, because while I had left the HOA personally, I had entered it financially, on her street. Karen didn't respond right away when I said I owned 4 houses on her block. She just stared at me, like someone had rearranged the chessboard without telling her. You don't live on Phase 1, she said finally. I don't need to, I replied. I own property there. And ownership means voting rights. That's when it clicked for her. She didn't just lose control of me. She gained me as a voting member inside her strongest territory. Brookstone Meadows' HOA voting structure was simple. 1 vote per property. Not per person, not per household. Per property. Karen had always relied on tight margins to pass new compliance measures. Architectural expansions, fee increases, enforcement budgets. Most motions passed by 3 or 5 votes. I now controlled 4. And unlike passive owners, I read everything. Within a week of the meeting, I received a letter regarding my Phase 1 homes. Reminder: rental properties must comply with community character guidelines. There was nothing in the bylaws prohibiting rentals, but Karen tried something new. She proposed a rental cap, limiting non-owner-occupied homes to 10% of the neighborhood. Convenient timing. Guess what the current percentage was? 9.6%. My 4 properties would push it over. Karen called a special vote. Protecting neighborhood integrity. That's how she framed it. But homeowners started asking questions. Why now? Why wasn't this discussed before? Is this about one investor? Yes, it was. Before the vote, I requested full financial statements for the past 3 years. As a property owner, I had that right. The treasurer hesitated, delayed, eventually sent partial documents. That's when I saw it. Reserve funds were dangerously low, way below recommended thresholds. The HOA had overspent on landscaping redesign, increased enforcement contractor payments, approved a legal consultation fund, and yet dues had remained stable. How? They'd been using reserves to cover operational gaps. That's not sustainable. The clubhouse was packed. Karen opened with a polished speech about preserving property values. Then she introduced the rental cap proposal. Before discussion could close, I stood. As a multi-property owner, I'd like to ask about the reserve balance. The room shifted. Nobody had mentioned reserves. Karen's smile thinned. That's not relevant to rental caps. It is if we're discussing long-term stability, I replied. Then I read the numbers. Projected reserve shortfall within 18 months. Potential special assessment required. Silence. Homeowners hate 2 words: special assessment. Once finances were on the table, attention shifted. People began questioning leadership priorities. The rental cap proposal lost by 7 votes. 7. 4 of them mine. Karen didn't just lose, she lost publicly. The next morning, an email went out. Certain investors are attempting to manipulate community governance. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. But that message backfired. Because homeowners had seen the numbers themselves, and numbers don't lie. Suddenly, my Phase 1 properties received fence height checks, trash can timing warnings, lawn measurement notices, perfectly legal inspections, but suspiciously frequent. My property manager documented everything: dates, times, photos, patterns matter in court. 2 longtime homeowners approached me privately. They'd lived there 15+ years. They were tired. Is it true reserves are that low? One asked. Yes. Why didn't we know? Because no one asked. That's when they suggested something bold. Run for the board. Remember, I left the HOA personally. But through my 4 properties, I was fully eligible to run for a Phase 1 board seat. Karen never imagined I'd sit at the table she controlled. I submitted my candidacy. My platform was simple: transparency, responsible budgeting, clear enforcement standards, no emotional attacks, no retaliation talk, just governance. Karen immediately nominated herself again. Her campaign email focused on protecting Brookstone Meadows from outside influence. Translation: me. For the first time in years, the election was competitive. Neighbors started comparing notes, asking for financial breakdowns, reading bylaws. Attendance doubled at meetings. Authority weakens when scrutiny increases. I didn't argue publicly. I didn't respond to emotional emails. I let facts travel on their own. Meanwhile, my rental properties were maintained immaculately. Fresh paint, clean lawns, responsible tenants, no violations, no complaints. I gave her no ammunition. Ballots counted in the clubhouse. Tension thick. Final result? I won by 9 votes. 9. Karen retained a seat, but lost presidency when the new board reorganized leadership roles. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't in charge. She didn't yell. She didn't storm out. She simply said, "This isn't over." And maybe she believed that. But the power dynamic had shifted. Because now, I wasn't just a homeowner who left. I was a board member overseeing her block. Karen was right about one thing. It wasn't over. Because winning a board seat didn't just change optics. It gave me access. And access changes everything. The atmosphere was polite, cold, professional. I requested 3 things immediately: full reserve study, update, enforcement contract review, legal expense breakdown for the past 24 months, no accusations, just governance. Karen objected. That level of detail isn't necessary for routine oversight. But oversight is literally the job. The motion passed 3-2. She wasn't majority anymore. The HOA used a third-party compliance company, flat monthly fee, plus per violation commission. Meaning, the more violations issued, the more the company earned. Guess who approved that contract 3 years ago? Karen. Guess when violation frequency doubled? Also 3 years ago. Correlation isn't always causation, but this one was obvious. Next discovery. Over $48,000 spent on legal consultation. Most of it related to covenant reinterpretations, enforcement authority expansion, pre-litigation notices, including internal review of my Phase 3 withdrawal. Homeowners never voted on that spending. It was categorized as operational advisory, technically allowed, practically questionable. I proposed an independent financial audit, external firm, transparent report. Karen argued it was unnecessary cost. I argued uncertainty costs more. The vote passed. 3 days later, I received notice. Karen filed an ethics complaint against me. Allegation: conflict of interest due to rental ownership. She claimed my votes regarding enforcement reform financially benefited me, which was ironic, since enforcement fines funded reserves that she'd depleted. Still, the complaint triggered review. I welcomed it. Transparency protects you when you've done nothing wrong. 6 weeks later, the independent report arrived. It confirmed reserve contributions had been underfunded for 5 consecutive years. Enforcement revenue projections were inflated and unpredictable. Legal expenses exceeded industry norms by 37%. No long-term capital plan existed that wasn't catastrophic mismanagement, but it was poor leadership and documented. We presented the findings at an open forum. This time, no dramatic speeches, just slides, graphs, numbers. One homeowner asked, "Did enforcement increase because we needed revenue?" The room went quiet. Karen responded quickly, "Absolutely not. But data showed enforcement spiked exactly when reserves dipped. Perception became powerful. The board voted to renegotiate the enforcement contract, cap annual legal consultation spending, publish quarterly financial summaries, freeze new architectural restrictions, not radical changes, just stabilizing ones. Karen voted no on every item. Remember the Phase 3 withdrawal clause? After watching what happened, 2 other Phase 3 homeowners approached me. They wanted out too. They'd seen how enforcement operated. They were done. If 60% signed again, additional properties could detach. Karen realized something terrifying. Her authority wasn't shrinking because of rebellion. It was shrinking because of structure. The documents allowed it. Karen circulated a petition to amend bylaws, removing the withdrawal clause permanently. But amendments required 75% approval across all phases. She barely secured 42%. People weren't interested in locking doors after someone used the exit properly. One evening, Karen knocked on my door. No clipboard, no documents, just frustration. "You destabilized everything," she said. "I read the rules," I replied. "That's not how this works." "It is," I said calmly. "It always has been." For years, nobody questioned process. Questioning feels like disruption, but it's actually correction. 3 months later, Karen stepped down from the board entirely. Her official statement cited desire to focus on personal matters. Unofficially, authority without majority is exhausting. With balanced leadership, reserve funding stabilized, enforcement complaints dropped by 40%, meeting attendance normalized, financial transparency increased, and my 4 rental homes, fully compliant, quiet, profitable. I left the HOA because I was tired of overreach. Then I ended up reshaping it from the inside. Not through revenge, through documentation, through votes, through calm persistence. HOAs aren't dictatorships, they're contractual organizations, and contracts work both ways. If withdrawal exists, it can be used. If voting rights exist, they can shift power. If authority oversteps, it can be challenged. Legally, professionally, effectively. My Phase 3? Home? Independent? No HOA oversight? My Phase 1 block? Stable? Better funded? Less aggressive? And the police? They haven't returned since that first day, because moving out of an HOA isn't a crime, but misunderstanding authority? That's expensive.